Well, good morning. It is certainly wonderful to be with all of you this morning. Glad to be able to worship with all of you as we come together and worship our God together, singing songs of praises. Thank you all for all those songs that you sang, Brother John, this morning. Thank you for all those who led this morning in service. I do want to mention just next week I will not be here. Beth and Blakely and I are going out of town, so Brother Jan will be preaching next week, so I do appreciate him filling in. And the Wednesday after, when we're gone, Brother Allen will be taking my class, and I appreciate that as well. So just keep that in mind. I do appreciate all the men here helping out and and helping me when I need it. So this morning, the passage of Scripture that was read for us by Brother Scott was the account of David and Goliath, which is one that most are familiar with, and it has a strong story element of heroism in it. And the Bible is complete throughout of these stories of great feats of heroism, of Samson's great strength and overcoming the Philistines in his time as being a judge, or the time as David where he overcomes this great battle of Goliath, this great giant of a man, and overcomes him with one smooth stone as he slings it into his forehead and fells this giant of a man who should be able to crush armies all by himself. We see these other feats of strength all put together. And when it comes down to it, we see all these images of great men or great men and women standing up for their faith, being able to display their great faithfulness by achieving great feats. And we look at that and we're like, wow. And then there's me in my story today, where we might kind of think, well, so we look at these men and great women of the Bible, if I'm supposed to emulate them, man, their story and their life don't seem compared to mine at all. Mine might seem mundane. Mine might seem not as worthy or not as good as they might have lived. And we might start to look at, well, where's my giant that I might face? Where's my incredible feat that I might be able to overcome to show how great I am a faithful servant to God? We might ask the question, how do we live heroically in such mundane times? Well, heroic living, does it have to be measured by some great event, by something so strong and something so great that people will look on us in that kind of honor and that we can feel good about standing up for God? But showing faithfulness, it's all about living faithfully and can be accomplished by the small things in life as well. And so this morning I kind of want to take a look at that and see if we can't draw out some things if we ever feel like our lives or our servitude is lacking, when we might be looking for something greater than what's right there in front of us. In Joshua chapter 1, we read of Joshua's call. Starting in verse 6. It says, Be strong and of good courage, for unto this people shalt thou divide for inheritance the land, which I swear unto their fathers to give them, and only thou, strong and very courageous, that thou mayest observe to do according to the law, which Moses my servant commanded thee. Turn not from it to the right hand or to the left, that thou mayest prosper whithersoever thou goest. This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, and thou mayest observe to do according in all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make the way of prosperous, and when thou shalt have good success. Have not I commanded thee? Be strong and be of good courage, and be not afraid. Neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest. And then Joshua commanded the officers of the people, saying, Pass through the host, and command the people, saying, Prepare you victuals. Within 3 days ye shall pass over this Jordan to go to possess the land, which the Lord your God giveth you to possess it. And to the Reubenites and to the Gadites and half the tribe of Manasseh spake Joshua, saying, Remember the word which Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, The Lord your God hath given you rest, and hath given you this land. Your wives, your little ones, and your cattle shall remain in this land, which Moses gave you on this side of Jordan. But ye shall pass before your brethren armed, and all the mighty men of valor, and help them, until the Lord have given your brethren rest, and he hath given you. And they have possessed the land which the Lord your God giveth them. And ye shall return to the land of your possession, and enjoy it, which Moses the Lord's servant gave you on this side of Jordan towards the sun rising. And they answered Joshua, saying, All that thou commandest us we will do, and whithersoever thou sendest us we will go. And according as we hearken unto Moses in all things, so we will hearken unto thee. Only the Lord thy God be with thee, as he was with Moses. And whosoever he that doth rebel against my commandment, and will not hearken unto thy words, into all that thou commandest him, he shall put to death, and only the strong will be of good courage. So here we see the word of the Lord coming to Joshua, to the people, of calling them to courage, calling them to possess the promised land that was chosen to them. And they did, and they took up, and they were able to start their conquest of the promised land, so they should take the land that the Lord had promised all the way back from Abraham's promise. And we think to us, well, where's our call of courage? Where's our call that we can do the same thing and show our faithfulness and conquer for God? Because today, there is no threat of a flood coming. There's no arks to build. So we can save those who will hear the sayings of Noah and get on this ark and be saved. Today, there's no more giants in the land to slay of this great and heathen army coming to take the people of God. There's no more lions roaming our land as they did with Benaiah in 1 Chronicles chapter 11. There's no more seas to part as Moses did and led his people to out of Egyptian captivity. There's no more cities to march and to conquer as Joshua did in the conquest to possess the land. There's no more Midianites to defeat as Gideon did, as he took his 300 and won and slew the 10,000 in Judges chapter 7. There's no more fiery furnaces to face, as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did in Daniel chapter 3. There's no more the threat of the lion's den to be cast into, as Daniel did in chapter 6. There's no more swords to bear, as John the Baptist was talking about in Matthew chapter 14. There's nobody persecuting us and threat of stoning us in the cities, as did with Stephen in Acts chapter 7. And there's no more widows to raise from the dead, as did Peter in Acts chapter 9. Many of these great things and great wonders, we know that the time as miracles have passed. And that's not really required of us today. But what do we do with that then? How do we still be courageous in a time where we don't have to face these great things? There was a time when I was young and I was kind of looking for that. I remember I wanted to be a preacher when I was young, 13 or 14, and I thought that, and at the time, I still am, I guess, a little bit, I was always and still am fascinated with superheroes. I like the DC comics, and I like the movies. I like the Marvel movies. I like the Marvel comics. And it's something that has always fascinated me. And it's something that I kind of wanted to emulate in my life. And I thought that maybe becoming a preacher, I could be a hero. I was kind of giving a hero complex in that. And I thought when I was a teenager, I could make maybe a league of preachers. And I could put this together, and I had it all figured out of the people that I would recruit, and we could go city to city and go to different religious bodies and convert them from within and convert the world like that. And I had these ideas of grandeur, of these big things, and that was kind of my giant that I was making. I wanted to slay. And when I get older, I see, well, it's not so much about that. I shouldn't focus on trying to do something great. There's a lot of things I can do in His kingdom that seem small, but make big impacts. Sometimes we see where our lives are not being physically threatened. And because of that, people will make giants of the people that are around them. Sometimes I've seen it where there are big doctrinal issues, that there are a lot of disagreements between brotherhoods or different religious bodies. And a lot of men will like to debate other preachers from other denominations or other religious bodies to try to test their skills and combat each other on this debate format. Now, debates can be very good. Is a good way for people to not only express their beliefs, but able to defend their beliefs in a public forum. And sometimes that can do a lot of good. It can give people the knowledge that they may not have on a certain subject, and they can really decide on their own by listening to such things of what's really the truth and what's not. But oftentimes, and I've seen a whole lot of debates in my life, what ends up happening as the two men, or the two combatants, I guess, that are debating, they spend a whole lot of time defaming the other one's character instead of staying on issue. They'll bring up, well, so-and-so is associated with these people. His friends are here. So whatever he says comes from that influence. So we shouldn't listen to whatever comes out of so-and-so's mouth. Or this person went to a different school. He uses these resources. He reads from this Bible. And so anything that he says is incredible. And they spend all the time on trying to discredit the person instead of staying on the issue. And when you get to that, you just start making it personal. And it's not supposed to be personal. So these men are just trying to persecute each other's character instead of trying to display the issues and trying to see if they hold water and hold weight. And they put all their energy into that kind of thing. Brethren can also get so wrapped up in trying to find the giants within their own congregations and their own brothers and sisters and trying to be nosy and say, well, you're doing this and you're doing that. And that's wrong, and I disagree with that. Nevertheless, ever looking at oneself or trying to maybe say, well, I saw that you went to this place. Or I saw that on Facebook that you're taking this stance here. Let's talk about that. Let's see if that is really the way that we should go. If that's really the way that we should go. Instead of that, they start fighting at each other. And people sometimes, especially like on social media platforms, people can get pretty confident behind a keyboard. And if they see something they'll disagree with, they'll just, well, that's wrong. You know what? Instead of taking the time to explain what their position might be and why they disagree with that. And they end up just fighting and bickering instead of staying on issue. Sometimes we find our giants out in the world against sinners. Now, I'm sure you've heard this phrase, because it's so often that we kind of live by this, because we know that God hates the sin and not the sinners. And so we have to hate the sin and not the sinners. The problem is that we don't know oftentimes how to separate the two. And we end up hating the sin so much of someone who is not, or maybe outside of Christ, not even a Christian, hating that so much that we end up hating them. But then we try to tell ourselves that we're just hating on their sin, not them. when we don't know how to separate that at all. We end up showing so much hate to an individual that we could never have a good influence on their lives. They'll completely turn away from that because of the way they're being treated. And sometimes we go to the Bible and see how Jesus handled certain situations harshly, like he did with the money changers in the temple, and how he's flipped the tables and he whipped the people out. And we try to look at that instance and say, well, that's the rule, that we should treat everyone instead of the exception to the rule, instead of looking at how Jesus ate with the publicans and the sinners to try to influence them, how we spent time with these people, tried to talk to them, tried to show them a better way with love and compassion. We forget all of that. So when we're trying to look for our giants, maybe we need to take a step back and try to dumb things down to that's probably the wrong turn of phrase, but try to think of things differently. Maybe we shouldn't look at all these evils as giants and trying to take down like David did, but maybe we can see how we can do more like Jesus did in the small ways. Because think of what God can do, and God can work through the small things. How it can work through your life. Things that may not seem grand, but how great of an impact they can really have. In the book of Zechariah, in chapter 4 and verse 10, it says, "For who hath despised the day of small things? For they shall rejoice and see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel. With those seven, they are the eyes of the Lord, which run to and fro through the whole earth." Sometimes it's the things that seem mundane, that seem small, that God works through the most. In John chapter 6, in verses 1 through 14, we see Jesus performing one of his most famous miracles. It says in verse 1, "After these things Jesus went over to the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, and the great multitude followed him because they saw his miracles, which he did on them that were diseased. And Jesus went up into the mountain, and there he sat with his disciples. And the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was nigh. And when Jesus lifted up his eyes and saw a great company come unto him, he saith unto Philip, Where shall we buy bread, and these may eat? And this he said to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. And Philip answered him, 200 pennies worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take a little. And one of his disciples, Andrew and Simon, Peter's brother, saith to him, There is a lad here, which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes. And what are they among so many? And Jesus said, Make the men sit down. And now there was much grass in the place, so that men sat down in the number of 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed to the disciples to them that were set down, likewise of the fishes, as much as they would, and they were filled. And he said unto the disciples, Gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. And therefore they gathered to them together and filled 12 baskets, and the fragments of 5 barley loaves, which remained over and above them that had eaten. And then those men which had seen a miracle that Jesus did said that this is the truth, that the prophet that should come into the world. Jesus performed seemingly a little thing. He saw a multitude that was hungry, and he took 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and he fed them. They were hungry, he saw a need, and he fulfilled it. It seems simple, even though that's a great miracle. Of all of these men and women were full of feeding the mass of just these, starting with just 5 loaves and 2 fishes. But he was making a point. When he filled the 12 baskets of fragments and the 5 barley loaves in chapter 13, to me, that represents the 12 baskets of the 12 tribes with the 5 great Gentile nations that were at the time, and they were to come together. They were feasting together, Jesus showing in times to come that the walls of Jew and Gentile will come down, and you will be one people, and you can commune, you can eat with one another. And Jesus doing a simple act had this great impact on the people there. Not only did it show Jesus' great power that he was, in fact, who he said he was, but it also was a sign in pointing them what was to come. We've looked at this one before, but in Mark chapter 12, in the account of the widow and the mite, verses 41 of Mark chapter 12, and Jesus sat over against the treasury and beheld how people cast the money into the treasury, and the many that were rich and cast much. And there came a poor widow, and she threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing. And he called unto him his disciples, and saith, Verily I say unto you, that this poor widow hath cast more in than they which have cast into the treasury. For all they did cast of their abundance, that she did of her want, and cast all that she had, and even all her living. This thing that seems very small had a great impact on. It was a great sacrifice for that woman, but also a great teaching moment to his disciples who were there to see. When in the book of John, when Jesus is calling his disciples, that would become the 12 apostles, to him. In verse 42, when he says, And he brought them to Jesus, and said, Jesus beheld them and said, Thou art Simon, the son of Jonah, who shall be called Cephas, which is interpretation, a stone. I'm sure that Peter, at that moment when he was being called, didn't fully understand what he was going to be called to do. But that simple act that Jesus was doing in calling his disciples out of the world to follow him ended up having a great impact on the early church. Sometimes in our lives, we can come across situations where if they're handled in a certain way, it may not seem like a huge thing, but they can have a great impact. You think of a school teacher, like at the school down here. A school teacher that may see a child with the signs of abuse happening at the home. And a teacher finding his or herself in a position where they might have to have the courage to maybe call Child Protective Services to come and intervene for that child. And when they do, that child's life could change in an instant. Maybe it could be just as small as there's a coworker, or he or she is having a hard time at home. Maybe their life is spiraling. They're turning to drugs or alcohol, and it's bleeding over into their work. And you can see that something bad is happening in this person's life. Maybe all it would take is someone to stop and ask that person what's wrong. Say, I'm here, maybe a listening ear, and help them out of that situation. Maybe a plan that they can overcome that need in the time of need. Maybe it could be a brother or sister who's having a crisis of faith, who doesn't know where they stand, who doesn't know what they believe anymore, who's questioning all the things that they've been taught over the years, and maybe not, maybe doubting whether the existence of God. Maybe us as being family, as being brothers and sisters, could take the time and have an impact on that person, trying to show the love of Jesus and bringing that person into a better relationship with Him. See, God isn't asking us to do these great things like of the great men and women that we read about in the Bible. Sometimes he's simply asking us to be faithful, to have our priorities right, to be ready to serve when the time comes. In the book of Haggai, chapter 1, we see that this is during a time of Israel being displaced. They're about to come back into their home. In verse 1 it says, "In the 2nd year of Darius the king, in the 6th month, in the 1st day of the month, came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet unto Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, to Joshua the son of Josedek, the high priest, saying, Thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, This people say, The time is not come, the time that the Lord's house should be built. And then came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet, saying, It is time for you, O ye, to dwell in your side houses, and this house lie waste. Now therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, Consider your ways. Ye have sown much, and bring in little ye eat, but ye have not enough. Ye drink, but ye are not filled with drink. Ye clothe you, but there is none warm. And he that earneth wages to put into a bag with holes. And thus saith the Lord of hosts, Consider your ways. Go up to the mountain and bring wood, and build the house, and I will take pleasure in it, and I will be glorified, saith the Lord. Ye looked for much, and lo, it was came to little. And when ye brought it home, I did blow upon it. Why, saith the Lord of hosts? Because mine house that is waste, and ye run every man unto his own house. Therefore, the heaven over you is stayed from dew, and the earth is stayed from her fruit. And I call from her drought upon the land, and upon the mountains, and upon the corn, upon the new wine, and upon the oil, and upon that which the ground bringeth forth, and upon the men, upon their cattle, and upon all the labor of their hands. And then Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel, and Joshua the son of Josedek the high priest, with all the remnant of the people, obeyed the voice of the Lord their God, and the words of Haggai the prophet, as the Lord their God had sent him. And the people did fear before the Lord. And then spake Haggai the Lord's messenger the Lord's message unto the people, saying, I am with you, saith the Lord. And the Lord stirred up the spirit of Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and the spirit of Joshua the son of Josedek the high priest, and the spirit of all the remnant of the people, that they came, did work in the house of the Lord of hosts, their God. And in the 24th day of the 6th month, in the 2nd year of Darius the king. For a long time, the people of Judah were displaced from their homeland. They were taken into captivity. And now that they're getting to come back, there were some that were wrapped up too much in their material blessings and in what they were having right in front of them, instead of trying to give their hearts in service back to the Lord. And here God is calling them back to the city, back to come and build the temple once again, back. And it didn't really seem like a great thing for them anymore. The materialism of our culture can get in the way of our service to God just like it did them. Sometimes that can be a greater giant that we have to overcome than some great victory that David gained over Goliath. God is still looking for courageous men. And if we look, there are plenty of ways to demonstrate heroism even today. It may not be as comparable as to the accounts that we read throughout Scripture, but those little ways will have their impact on our community. The church that we worship with here, we try and do our very best to try to impact our community. The program that we have with Blanche School right now, that we're very thankful that Ms. Sandy's been in charge of that and doing great work for the kids and the teachers there at Blanche, that will end up providing so much fruit. But we shouldn't just rely on that. We always have to be finding ways that we can even better serve our community. That's a good place to start. And sometimes we may not think that that's really going to have an impact, but that right there is. That can be our giant. Sometimes is living as Christians, our giant that we're facing is just life. Life in general. Sometimes life can be hard. And sometimes we have to give ourselves a break and do the best that we can to live in service to God. And if we do so, if we all together try to work as one, then we can all help each other have the best impact that we can in His service and His kingdom. And we can try to help us all to go to heaven. So, when we answer the call of courage, how do we respond? How will we find ways? Even if they seem mundane and little, they can always have their impact. So I hope that this morning that's an encouragement to you. If there's someone here this morning who is subject to the Lord's invitation in any way, whether it is to become a Christian, to add their life to Christ in His service in His kingdom, or maybe a Christian who had done so but then found themselves outside once again, help us pray for you. Help us help you come home and you can start living for Him once again. Whatever your need is, whether a spiritual sickness or physical ailment, let us help you in your life. We all want to help each other in the family of God. Whatever your need is, you can make those things known this morning as we stand and as we sing.